Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, brought to you by Bet365. My name is Dave Gurgelli. I am joined by Harman Dial. We know where the Canucks are going to select now. We know it's going to be 15th overall. We thought it was going to be 15th overall. Your reaction to the draft lottery, Harm? Utah moving right on up. New York moving right on up to the top.
Well, I thought it was funny that Drancer pointed out how if the Canucks didn't have that miracle comeback against the Stars in Game 77, when they were down 3 goals in the last minute, had they lost that game, they would have been in Utah slot, and Utah, of course, jumped way up. But let's be honest, if the Canucks were in Utah spot, something else would have changed that would have screwed the Canucks' chances of winning the lottery anyway. So I'm not gonna reminisce about what could have been around that. Islanders winning first overall, bit of a shock. That franchise kind of needs that kind of jolt. I'm not gonna lie, it's also been, if I'm an Islanders fan, disheartening hearing some of the names that are being rumored for president or GM slots, whether it's Ken Holland, Jarmo Kekalainen, Mark Bergevin. So they really need this first overall pick. Although I will say the Isles winning the number one pick is probably one of the most boring outcomes we could have had.
One of the most boring teams, just one of the most boring franchises in the sport, right? That's what it comes down to. And you brought up the Utah thing. It always goes back to this. Canucks were one ball off of Connor Bedard. For those that don't know that, that's true. They were one ball off of Connor Bedard, which I don't think really means much to many people. But man, could you imagine if the Canucks were one ball off of Connor Bedard with this format where they show which ball your team needs and which ones you need to line up to be able to get the pick? And for those that didn't see it, the broadcast was actually really cool. I liked the way they did this, and I made a joke yesterday. I said, this thing's always rigged. And I've been saying for years, we've been saying it for years, do it on camera. Do the count on camera. Why not make that a show? And that's what they did. The guy with his back turned, I still don't quite get that because he's just yelling draw at the end of a 30-second timer. Like, I don't quite understand that aspect of it, but it was good television, I thought. And that's what the NHL is looking for. I thought they knocked it out of the park. And people thought I was being sarcastic when I said, the new draft lottery format is great. I really liked it. I thought it was great. I thought it was really cool how John Buccigross kind of walked through which numbers were available and which teams were kind of out of the running for each pick. I thought that was great. I thought that was great television. And like I said, imagine if there was that available with the Connor Bedard draft when the Canucks were one ball off. Imagine sitting through that and seeing that one ball, you need one more ball and you would have got Connor Bedard.
It's an upgrade compared to the way they used to do it, where Bill Daly would just flip the cards. That in the commercial breaks in between, ruining the flow, and half the time it felt like the results would accidentally get leaked before the program, whether some of those screenshots are real or not. There was always some drama surrounding that,
exactly.
And it wasn't a good product for TV.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Okay, so Canucks, they're going to draft 15th overall. I know all the tall guys, but we're going to bring in someone that knows a lot more than those guys. Let's bring in Dave Hall, who's brought to you by Pacific Toyota dealers, who want to tell you about the 100% electric Toyota BZ4X. An SUV packed with plenty of space, the BZ4X can handle any terrain and can take you from the city to the slopes. It's backed by the peace of mind that comes with knowing you're driving a Toyota, and if you're driving a BZ4X, you get access to HOV lanes even if you're driving alone. When you choose the BZ4X, you can get up to $6,500 in rebates and incentives, and now you can finance a 2025 BZ4X from 0.99% APR for 36 months. Visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer today. Get your questions in for Dave, folks. And if you want to make sure your question gets read, hit us with a super chat. Of course, all of our super chat proceeds go to the BC Mental Health Foundation, changing the face of mental health and addiction by supporting breakthroughs in care, public understanding, research, and knowledge exchange. Dave Hall joins us now, the prospect guy over at Canucks Army. Dave, we've started a series at Canucks Army where we do targets that the Canucks could select at 15th overall in the draft. You led that off with Brady Martin. First of all, how tall is he? 2, tell me more about Brady Martin.
Unfortunately, he's not the tallest of tall. He's only 6 foot, 174 pounds. But the good news is they're only 18. There's tons of wiggle room there, a lot of pathway. But the thing about Brady Martin, the reason why I love him is, we've been asking for this Canucks team to have a little more grit, a little more truculence up front, not just Kiefer Sherwood. Well, Brady Martin doesn't play like 6 foot. He plays like he's 7 feet. He's just, no matter what, I don't think you'll find him take a shift off. He's just always hounding carriers. He had so many hits that I actually have a clip on there where I started, putting a compilation of all his hits. I had to stop because I would just go all night. I believe he had over 150 hits, which more than triples any other Greyhound skater. So he just hits everything and anything all the time. Led the team in block shots, also led the team in points. So although his point totals aren't jaw-dropping, only 33 goals in 57 games, which is still good. But he's got a wicked release, a hard shot that's, NHL projectable. And I just think overall, if Brady Martin is available at 15, I think he's a layup to take. Unfortunately, it sounds like after a pretty good U18 World Juniors, the secret may be out of the bag and he may actually go top 10 now. I think top 10 is probably a little too generous, but you never know these days. He's a gamer for sure.
Yeah, Dave, my follow-up was going to be, because I also love Brady Martin in terms of, doing my homework, how well-rounded he is, the tenaciousness, ability to play center ice position where the Canucks don't have a lot of high-quality prospects. Yes. He was somebody that I circled as like if he falls, that's such a slam dunk. But the worry that I've kind of had is historically when you look at how teams draft players with Martin's kind of profile that are so well-rounded, play the premium center ice position, they tend to get overdrafted and go earlier than a lot of people suspect. Whereas the profile of the kind of player that slips in the draft sometimes is like a Victor Eklund, a small finesse forward who right now is projected towards the latter part of the top 10, but could sort of do the Jonathan Lekkemacki thing where he slips down to the middle of the first round. So two-part question: how realistic is it that there is going to be one of those higher profile centers still available at 15? And second, if a smaller finesse winger like Eklund does drop to 15, does he become a slam dunk? You got to take this guy type of prospect?
Yeah, and to be honest, there's probably no better, another player for this assignment. I think Victor Eklund is probably that classic case of, we think he's going to go top 10. He's definitely going top 10. He's got all the skill in the world, but like you said, he's small. Yeah, he's tenacious. He makes up for it, but will that be translatable to the next level? So I think the question, although this is a bit of a cop-out answer, I think it really depends on who's available, because there are some other players that we've learned through injuries that could be available at 15 to them already, let alone Victor Eklund. So I think Eklund would be a nice pick. I think for what I think the Canucks should target, typically I'm a best player available kind of guy. That's typically how I roll. But I just think when you look at this prospect pool, and obviously I take a look at it every single day, I can't get past the fact that they need a right shot center. And I just think even if you don't get the Brady Martin, even if you don't get noted my guy, so before even Brady Martin, I've been on Jake O'Brien all season long. Unfortunately, that cat's out of the bag, and I don't think the Canucks will get him. So even if those two guys are gone, there's still a few names that I think they could snag at that point that just better fit their organization, not only from a positional standpoint, but also they're not that far off from being best player available. So while Victor Eklund is super fun, I would personally complain with having Victor Eklund at all. He's a fun, tenacious, point producing player. I just think you're probably best to go with a bit of a safer pick in terms of upside.
So the interesting thing. Oh, sorry, Carmen, you had a follow up. Go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to quickly sort of get your take on who, let's say, the O'Brien sort of Martin tier of centers is gone, because it sounds like there could realistically be 5 or 6 centermen at the top of the draft class that get taken in the top 10, 11 picks. Assuming those top 5 or 6 centers are off the board, I was sort of looking at a lot of the prospect rankings in the middle of the first round. There are a lot of quality wingers, it seems like, that could be realistically available, but I wasn't sure about that sort of like next tier of centermen. Who are 1 or 2 of the names that you'd be sort of watching and circling as far as being realistic candidates at 15?
Yeah, well, I think so. Two players that I think might be a bit of a reach, like 15 might be a little generous, but I think guys like a guy like Braden Coots or even a Cole Reshny, who's really jumped up the rankings this year. He's a bit of a both of them are a bit of a reach, but I just think they're both very very reliable two-way centers that can play both at both ends of the ice. And like Braden Coots, for example, you're not going to find a harder worker than he, and he could put in all situations and he'll just give it his all. He didn't put up the highest points this year, but he was over a point per game on a pretty low impact offensive team in Seattle. There is definitely potential for more, and he's just a hard worker that will kill poundies for you. And so I just think Braden Coots is a name that, although it might be like just a couple picks of a reach, that's a name. Cole Reshny, of course, he's really brought it on in the last little bit here, especially the U18s and in the playoffs. But a name that I'm very interested in, and it's all because of an injury, is Carter Bear. Like, I know that he's technically a winger, but I've talked to a few scouts now, and it sounds like a lot assume that he might be projectable to play at the center ice. He does play center as well, but it sounds like a lot of people believe that he could do it at the next level. So if a guy like Carter Bear, who originally was probably a top 10 pick if it weren't for a season-ending Achilles injury, he's a guy that might be available, and he's the kind of guy that has the same tenacity as all the players we've mentioned so far, but actually has that top 6 pedigree that could actually put up some points and be a decent player. So yeah, there's a little bit of injury scared. You're a little bit weary of the injury with the Achilles, but it sounds like from everyone I've spoken to, it wasn't a full tear, it was just a partial. So although Achilles can be somewhat of a reoccurring injury, it might be a player that might slide to 15 because they're worried. So if he's available, I think Carter Bear is probably a slam dunk, but then if not, I think a Braden Coots or a Cole Reshny are a pretty good bet as well.
Yeah, LC250 was asking you to pick if Carter Bear, Brady Martin, and Cole Reshny are all available. Who are you taking? It sounds like Carter Bear's the answer, but
yeah, but that one's close.
Today.
That one's close. Like, honestly, that one's super close. That's like, at that point, I don't care who it is. I'm really high on Brady Martin, I have to say. Like, I really like Carter Bear, and I think Martin would be my pick, only because with Bear there is the unknown of the injury, right? Like, we just don't know. Achilles, sometimes they're hit or miss, right? So I think he's going to drop because of that. Maybe not to 15, but I can say I don't know who they're running up to pick at that point.
Dave, it seems like there's been a lot of movement in the rankings in the past few months. And I just read Stephen Ellis's first mock draft since the draft lottery, and it's up over at Daily Faceoff. Really good read. Stephen obviously does a great job covering prospects around the whole league. And one name that kind of stuck out to me for multiple reasons, obviously it's a very, very cool name. Stephen has the Canucks drafting Roger McQueen at 15th overall from the Brandon Wheat Kings. Tell us about Roger McQueen.
Okay, so when I woke up this morning, and this is no disrespect to Stephen Ellis. Stephen Ellis does a fantastic work. Stephen, love you. When I woke up this morning, I thought that was crazy. There's no way Roger McQueen is falling to 15. And the reason why I say that is, like, I haven't even really focused on Roger McQueen so much this season, because when I'm covering the Canucks, I just, I didn't assume they would be a bottom feeder team. So I just, there's some guys, Roger McQueen, James Higgins, Michael Misa, that we just know are going to go in the top end of the draft. So I just focus on the guys that I think are going that mushy middle. So when I saw Roger McQueen at 15, I'm thinking, okay, I know he has the back injury, but there's just no way that a guy of that caliber could drop. So I did a bit of recon, and it turns out that there is some skepticism on that back injury. So, although I still think there's probably a good chance that he does go in the top 10, there sounds like there could be a very realistic pathway towards him dropping to 15th. And so if that's the case, like, back injuries are tough because, there's not one, specific incident that you can kind of relay it to. So, people are weary of the back injury, but I think if he's dropping to 15, you're running to the podium. I mean, we're talking about a towering center, right shot center, who can skate just as, like, he can skate like he isn't 6'5". He's a great net front presence. He's got an incredible puck touch. He can score goals. He can play make. He's a layup if they have him at 15 to just run to the podium and take. Although, albeit there is some risk with the back injury, but I just think if he's dropping to 15th, you're running. But yeah, it turns out I thought it was crazy. It turns out maybe Stephen was onto something there. So if Roger McQueen, if he's available, we love the name. So
yeah, I'm sort of in a similar boat as you, where I had McQueen in the territory similar to Brady Martin, where I don't expect him to be available. But I mean, hey, Quinn Hughes wasn't expected to be available at 7th overall. So weird things can happen at the draft. And so while you're not planning for it to necessarily happen, it does become a layup, run to the podium if he somehow falls to 15. Wanted to shift away from the draft a little bit. You've probably followed the Abbotsford Canucks closer than anybody in the market, arguably. Manny Malhotra's name has obviously emerged as a possible head coaching candidate in Vancouver. What are your thoughts on Malhotra's coaching style here in Abbey, and whether you believe he's ready to potentially take over as the big club's head coach?
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. He's been fantastic this season. You know, I'm going to even take it back to the last game in the playoffs where they're down 3-0 in the first period. And then he not only makes a swap in the crease where he brings in Nikita Tolopilo, gives Artur Silas a rest, but he puts his entire lineup through a blender and just completely brings out a brand new system for the second and third period to kind of jolt his team, which, you know, a lot of people think that's an easy thing to do, but when you're, you know, in a playoff game, a lot of coaches might just sit back and just hope that they finally catch fire with the same thing. But he's kind of, you know, he's changing it up on the fly, and he's really, you can tell like he's coaching, right? And so I can't say enough good things about how Manny Malhotra's coached down there. I mean, it's evident from, you know, the incredible run they've been on since January. But even before that, you could tell that it took the team a little bit to get into a system. But now that it's implemented, they're just rolling. And so, you know, it's a bit of a mixed bag for me. Like on one end, I do think it might be a little rushed. You know, like one season, that's a short stint. And while I don't want to discredit his job at all, it is, you know, it's a big tier to jump right to the NHL level. But with that said, he's also had some, you know, assistant coaching experience. He knows the system well. He knows the players, and so, you know, you put the right coaching environment around him, and maybe it isn't that tough of a jump. So. Again, a bit of a cop-out answer. I think it's a bit of both. I personally tend to lean towards that. It's a little bit rushed, but then again, what's the vision? If you don't have Manny Malhotra go, so you bring in a coach. Are you hiring that coach for one season and saying, hey, Manny's our guy, so he's coming in on 1 year? Or do you say, hey, Manny, sorry, we're going with X, Y, and Z. We don't really see a pathway towards you, right? And so who knows, maybe they bring him in as an assistant coach, right? Like maybe they start to ease him in that way. But I don't know. I think he's doing a fantastic job. I wouldn't be upset if they do hire him, but I think there's definitely questions as to, you know, is it too soon?
We got a super chat from Web.3, $2 super chat. We appreciate the donation to the BC Mental Health Foundation. He said, Manny equals vibes. We need that right now. Dave, I've been saying it for a while. I'm a big fan of Manny Malhotra. One question I think people have had about Manny is the system. Well, what kind of system does Manny play? How far away is he from being just a carbon copy of Rick Tocchet? Because we've obviously seen a lot of his players find success in Rick Tocchet's NHL lineup. Does Abbotsford play that same lock it down defensive style with you know, what people would argue is not much offense?
Well, I think it's a little bit of a hybrid. Like in the third period, they're one of the best third period teams rather in the league. When they get up by a couple goals in the third period, they lock it down and they very rarely give up the leads. So I think when they're in the position to, he does lock it down. Like you can tell that there's a progression there from the NHL down to the AHL. But I also do think he lets his players fly a little bit. Like he'll let them, you know, you see a guy like Max Sasson and you know, Archdeep Baines. He does allow them to kind of do their thing, and you especially notice it on the back end where you got before it was, you know, Eric Brandstrom. Now we got Victor Mancini. You know, he allows them to kind of spread their wings a little bit and, you know, trust that they're going to do the right thing and just kind of let them play to their skill sets. So I think it's a bit of a hybrid. In the third period, definitely when they're up, you definitely see them lock it down and play. You know, I don't want to call it low event hockey, but they definitely close it down and lock it up. So I think he just plays a nice hybrid style where you could tell he's trying to implement those same rules as they do in the NHL so that they're ready for it. But he also kind of beats to his own drum as well.
This one from Cynical question in the chat. Who is the fool's gold player the Canucks should not draft?
That's a great question.
Okay. I got an answer for it, and only because I know Quads and I were talking about him earlier. I know that, just relaying it back to Stephen Ellis's mock draft, I know that he had Logan Hensler going right before McQueen. And
Yep.
again, this isn't a knock on Logan Hensler. I just, he's a right-hand shot. There's a lot to like. He's a good skater. He's a two-way responsible guy. I just think the way that this prospect pool is, and I hate to just keep on bringing it back to that right shot center, like, please. I just think there's a lot more high risk, high reward players that you could probably take in the forward position than a guy like a dependable, steady Eddie, Cole McWard type player like Logan Hensler, right? So it's not a bad pick. Whoever takes him, he's probably going to be a great defenseman. But I just think he's very safe, and I just think if the Canucks do keep Tom Willander, which we all hope he does. We've seen Victor Mancini play very great down in Abbotsford. They've obviously got Philip Hronik. There's enough spots on the right side that I think I'm comfortable not to take a Logan Hensler. And it has nothing to do with him. I just think if there's one guy not to take, it would probably be him. Just only because I know he's in and around that realm of that 13 to 20 kind of style. So I think he would be my pick in that spot.
I think that's a great answer. You got to take swings. You got to take swings if you're the Canucks. Got to take risks. Yeah. Okay. The draft lottery format we were talking about right before you joined, Dave. What did you think of it?
I'm not gonna lie, I missed it.
Okay.
I didn't think it was as early as it was, so I actually missed it, unfortunately. But everything I've read, which I'm happy they're bringing it up, because I was listening to you guys talk before, and I agree. The holding up the cards, and this
So
the next
stale.
pick. Stale. And as you mentioned, Harm, with the commercial breaks, you grab a beer and you're watching the thing, and all you're watching is signs get posted up. So just not great.
Back to Abby, through their playoff run so far, who's one player that has exceeded expectations the most in your mind, and one player that has underperformed expectations the most?
Okay, I've already kind of talked about him, so I don't really want to say Victor Mancini. He's probably been my number one guy. He's just just on another level. A lot of elements to his game that you just didn't see in Vancouver, rightfully so. He's trying to be responsible and not get demoted down to the AHL. But he's been a rover out there. It's been quite something. His skating is on a whole another level, which we all knew he had. But he's been very impressive. But I will say I've also just really liked Sammy Blais. I know he's not a prospect, but you just can't help but love what he brings to the ice. Like, you really notice it, not only in this back half of the season, but in these playoffs. He's getting the tone set right away with a couple big hits. He's going out, he's putting up points, he's making his line mates better. So I think if there's anyone who's really stepped up to me, it's Sammy Blais, and I'd be shocked if he hasn't earned himself into a two-way contract in the NHL next year. It's my hot take. I think whether it's with Vancouver or not, I think Sammy Blais probably done enough to earn himself a contract. To be quite honest, there's quite a few people that I'd like to see a little more from in the lineup. Even although he has 4 assists, I think Arshdeep Bains has a lot more to give. I think Atu Ratu, although he was injured midway through last game, I think he needs to step up. I think he could do a lot more, especially in the production realm. I think Jonathan Lekkerimäki, before he got injured, I think there was maybe one sequence in game 2, I believe, of the first round, where you were like, oh, he hit the post and then hit this paddle of the stick, and that was literally all we saw from Jonathan Lekkerimäki. And that's despite playing top line minutes, top line power play, getting all the time. He was virtually unnoticeable. So, and then same goes with Danila Klimovic, but with him, you kind of notice, because he's, with all the people coming down, he was kind of dropped down to the third line. So I give him a little more grace, but definitely a lot of the younger guys. Right now it's the Sammy Blais, it's the Jujar Karas, it's the Nate Smiths, it's the Max Sassons. They're all stepping up. So a lot of the younger guys in my eyes.
Okay, Dave, last one from me. Try to answer this as unbiasedly as you can, okay?
Oh boy.
You take a 200-foot view of the Canucks, or 1,000-foot, whatever the saying is. You take a long view of the Canucks situation.
Okay.
Should they trade the 15th overall pick for immediate help? Patrick Levine sounded open to it. It's the subject of our poll question. What should they do with the 15th overall pick? I know you want to say draft one of these prospects, but when you really look at it, like what do you think the Canucks should do? And you could say draft. You got to give me your reason.
Yeah, okay. Well, I have reasons for both. And I hate to just come in here and flip-flop on all my answers here, but there really is, I think they should draft. I think, eventually they've picked in the first round, twice in the last, 6 years, give or take?
Been a
Don't
while.
quote me on, yeah, been a while. And you can't win. You just can't win without taking at least one draft pick in the first round for that long. It just can't happen. You can't make enough trades. You can't hit on that many transactions to not build at least something through the draft. So I think there's enough. While it's a bit of a shallower draft, I think at 15th you could still get some players that will play NHL games, like most definitely. So on one hand, I think it's a no-brainer to draft, but then on the same token, there is a desperate need for help up front. Whether it's the wing or in the center, that top six needs help. And so if you're not trading that 15th pick, where is that coming from? Well, Tom Verlander, yeah, he's a piece that everyone seems to be talking about right now. He's not signed, but that's kind of counterintuitive to what really needs to happen, right? And so I personally think they should draft. I do think they probably will trade it, but I think they need to draft. Eventually, you need to start building up that prospect pool, and whether they use them or not, at least to even trade for future transactions, you need to have some high-end first round picks to build something. So I'm going with this one to draft. I assume they're going to trade it though.
Dave, I appreciate the honesty. Thanks so much for joining us. Always a great time chatting with you. Thanks, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, fellas.
There he is, Dave Hall. You can read his work over at CanucksArmy.com. And of course, you can see him on Rink-Wide Vancouver for the rest of the Abbotsford playoffs as well. Harm, let's get to our poll question. We'll pick up that conversation right where we left off with Dave. It's our poll question, and it's brought to you by our friends over at Greta Bar YVR, the home of our electric watch parties during the season, and a great spot to catch whatever big sporting event is on. Right now, that's probably the Stanley Cup playoffs. We didn't even talk about Game 1 yet, but Game 1, you would have wanted to watch it at Greta. Great spot to watch. You got the arcade games, you've got the bar, and of course, you've got the street food menu as well. Make Greta your spot to hang out next time you're downtown. 50 West Cordova Street is the address. Let the games begin. Greta Bar YVR. All right, our poll question. Let's bring it up. I had two. We had a question because I thought our show was going to be about one thing, and then I remembered the draft lottery happened. So our show is about the draft lottery and the Canucks having the 15th overall pick. The question, what should the Canucks do with the 15th overall pick? Draft a player with it, trade it for center help, trade down in the draft, or trade up in the draft. 58.7% say trade it for center help, 32.7% say draft a player with it, 4.3% say trade down in the draft, and 4.3% say trade up in the draft.
I think you have to try shopping it to address the center needs. The complicating factor, though, is this year's draft class, especially in the middle, is weaker than years past. So while that, from the Canucks perspective, may incentivize this idea that, okay, this pick is more expendable than in years past anyway, how does that potentially hinder the trade value of that pick? Right? It goes both ways, because you can look at this shallower draft class and go, oh, well, even more reason to want to shop this pick. But for acquiring teams as well, it may not be as valuable of an asset as it would be the 15th overall pick in previous drafts. And the example that I always come back to is the Buffalo Sabres. Kevin Adams was very public in stating his desire to shop that pick for a player that could help them immediately. They were in and around the middle of the first round last year. First of all, last year's draft was probably a little bit stronger than this year's, and he couldn't exactly strike the right deal, find the right fit to trade that pick for immediate help. So you shop it, in my mind. You do your best. I would much rather they trade this year's first than next year's first. But we'll see if the right opportunity is on the table. And you should also clarify, when we're talking about trading that pick, nobody's talking about trading it for a guy with 1 year left on his contract or player deep into his 30s. You're trying to do it for somebody that has team control left. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a young guy, like a 22 or 23-year-old. It could be a guy in his late 20s, provided there's team control. But it has to be for somebody that is here for a while and can grow with your core for a while. And to execute that type of move, yeah, you look to shop that pick. And honestly, if it's a center, you're probably going to need to add on top of that pick anyway.
Depends who the center is, obviously. I saw our friend Tom Strantz and Jamie Dodd. They were playing a little game today where they were throwing names out and saying, would you have to add or would it just take the 15th overall pick to pull off that trade? And that was an interesting exercise to kind of go through, because I think what it showed is that there's some players that you look at and say, oh, would I even want to give up the 15th overall pick for them? And there's other players where you say, yeah, I'd give up the 15th overall pick, but I'd probably have to add Tom Willander to it, or I'd probably have to add this or whatever, right? So it's an interesting one to go with, but the point is that the 15th overall pick is still a valuable piece to some extent. It's just that they probably are going to need to figure out how valuable that is as the draft approaches. Here's what I would do. Go on.
No, you go ahead.
Here's what I would do. I would have a name in my head. Roger McQueen's a cool name, so that one's coming to mind, but the back injury thing scares me in all seriousness. Have a name that you're like, okay, this is our Quinn Hughes this year, in the sense of this is our player that if they fall, we are going to want to select them. Now, obviously, if a player like that is slipping, some team's going to want to jump up to 15th perhaps to make a trade. So that kind of complicates things a little bit. But for me, like, I would go into that draft with the pick still. Like, that would be a draft floor trade. I wouldn't trade that ahead of the draft, is what I'm trying to say. And I would say, okay, if there's a player that I really like that's available, or excuse me, if there's a player that I really like and he's still available at 15, I don't trade the pick. But if that player's taken 9th or 10th overall or whatever, yeah, flip the pick. I know it's maybe not that simple, especially on draft day, like other teams have plans as well. But that's probably the approach I would take, is that I'd keep it. And if I have that name where I say, okay, if this guy somehow falls, we can't pass up the opportunity to draft him, then I'll keep the pick.
Yeah, my worry would be if the team sort of doesn't find the right opportunity, keeps the pick, which fair enough, but then later in the summer realizes we have to upgrade this forward group substantially to maximize our chances of having a good season next year, so that Quinn Hughes will want to sign an extension with us in the summer of 2026. And if you've already used and selected a player with that 15th overall pick, and you're then trying to make a big swing trade for a centerman who will presumably be expensive, or not even just a centerman, even if it's a winger, right? Like, this team, we can talk about the center needs, but just at the forward position in general needs more borderline star talent. Not just like, we should clarify when we're talking top six, it's not somebody who can play a complementary role in your top six. We're not talking about a second liner. We're talking about somebody that can score 70, 80 points in terms of what this team needs, whether it's at wing, whether it's at center. You need multiple forwards ideally to add to this group. And so that's going to be expensive. My worry would be if you use this year's pick, the idea of trading next year's first rounder would scare me, because we've seen with this Canucks team that things can go wrong. And the idea of an unprotected first round pick going out the door in 2026, when you have no idea what Elias Pettersson will look like next season, when you don't have any certainty around Thatcher Demko's health, I think that would be too risky. And so that would sort of make me even more motivated to try and use that 15th pick to get the help that I need at the forward position.
It's an interesting conversation, one we're going to follow for the next little bit. Let's get to anyone else, which is brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians, who are on the road again, but they're going to be back home. And like I said yesterday, get out there, watch the next generation of ball players, even from both teams, really. And I know no one really cares about Mariners prospects or Diamondbacks prospects, but there's some good ones out there. Jacob got a chance to watch Drew Jones, obviously, son of Andrew Jones. Harmon, I'll give you $10 if you can spell Andrew Jones.
Okay, why? Is it spelled really weirdly? It must be that you're okay.
It is,
I'm not going to get it then.
I'll
try. I'll try.
Okay.
I'll try.
Okay, go ahead.
ANDRUJ.
No, you were one off. You got the U right. It's a W at the end.
Oh, okay.
You were very close. But anyways,
is Jones spelled weird too?
No, it's not. That's normal.
Okay.
But anyways, back to the C's. Somehow we got derailed. My bad. Back to the C's. Yeah, C's are on the road, but they're going to be back home. And folks, I've said it before, but these giveaways that the Vancouver Canadians are doing this season are just so much fun. I'm really liking what I'm seeing. Obviously, you got those Lumberjack jerseys that they wore. They've got the Asahi jerseys on Tuesday, May 13th. And then, yeah, there it is. The Son Brown bobblehead for the first 500 fans. That one is on Sunday, May 18th, which, of course, is a White Spot Family Fun Sunday, so don't miss it. But yeah, bobbleheads. Bobblehead games are here. I love bobbleheads. I've always been a bobblehead fan. Did you ever have bobbleheads growing up?
I never had any.
I love bobbleheads. My cousin had like the whole West Coast Express era of the Canucks, like a bunch of those. And I think he still has them in the box. I gotta check in with him on that. But yeah, I love bobbleheads. I've always thought they were so cool. Love bobbleheads. Okay. Check out the C's. Oh yeah, Jacob just pointed out in our chat, Hazel May. Obviously, everybody knows Hazel May. We'll be there for the May 17th Women in Sports game as well. All right. Check out CanadiansBaseball.com to get your tickets. All right. Let's get to anyone else. What do we have in the chat? Yeah, people are talking about not trading the pick. There was this quote from Patrick Alvin today in a conversation with Sportsnet's Ian McIntyre. This was the quote, okay, about trading the 15th overall pick. And like I said, courtesy of Sportsnet's Ian McIntyre. From Alvin, I think those are the options that I'm discussing with Jim. Based on where some of the conversations go with other teams, if we feel that we could impact our team in certain boxes right away, then I definitely think that would be something we have more in-depth conversations about. Now, Harm, my stance on whether or not you should trade that pick, I am fully on team trade the pick. Absolutely. And it goes back to the principle, the official position, I don't know if we can say official position of Canucks Conversation, but my official position is do everything you can to make Quinn Hughes stay. And to do that, you're going to need to win this year. And hey, even if you don't make a pick, right? It doesn't really matter if Quinn Hughes leaves anyway. You're going to have other years to make picks, right? I say make that trade, see what you can get, try to make this team better. Like, you look at this team right now, and we haven't done this, still early in the offseason, obviously, but like, look at this team right now. Look at what holes they have to fill. They need a first-line winger, and they need a second-line center. They might need a first-line center, but obviously all of this also comes with the caveat that they need Elias Pettersson to bounce back and be a first-line center, which looks like it's going to be the avenue that the team takes. And realistically, we've had this conversation a lot. That's probably their best bet rather than trading him for peanuts. Hoping Elias Pettersson bounces back as a first-line center is probably their best path forward. So you look at the team, and you need a second-line center, and you need a first-line winger this offseason. Like, Connor Garland is this team's best right-wing option right now. And you don't want that. You don't want him to be that. You want to have someone ahead of Connor Garland, because what makes Connor Garland so effective is playing in that middle six-wing role. And we talked about it the other day as well. You look at playoff teams, where would the Canucks' best wingers slot in on these playoff teams? A lot of the time, the answer is third line. They would be on the third, maybe fourth line at times, with DeBrusk and Garland being the best wingers, of course. So I am fully on board with team trade the pick, because if you're actually serious about this quick rebound and this idea of we're going to be competitive next year and this year was a blip, if we're going to compete next year, we're going to have to make that trade. That's got to be the mentality that the Canucks have right now.
Yeah, it's going to be a really long rebuild, a lot of pain if Quinn Hughes leaves. Like, this franchise just can't afford it. They have to do everything in their power to have as much success next season to entice him to sign an extension. You have to go all in this summer.
And I'm not saying be reckless, but I am saying be a little bit risky, right? Like, if you need to get lucky this offseason, you need to take risks to get lucky. That's all it comes down to. That's all it comes down to. Okay, AFP Analytics just dropped their new contract projections. This one from LC250. They project Brock Besser at 6 years at $8.5 million, Pius Suter at 4 years at $4.9 million, and Derek Forbort at $1.158 million. Harmon, I'm going to round up. I'm going to give you the DFQP Analytics projections. We're going to round up a little bit.
Dairy Queen.
That's right.
Dairy Queen.
Brock Besser at 6 years, 8.5. Pius Suter at 4 years at $5 million, and Derek Forbort at 2 years, $1.5 million. Which of those contracts are you signing? Which of those are you walking away from?
Walk away from Brock. That cap is too high. I don't think he's an $8.5 million player. Walking away from Suter. I would do 4 times 4, but a $5 million cap hit for a player that up until this year was mostly a 15-goal guy is just too expensive. And this team, my concern is they already have so much money committed to players that aren't full-time top 6 options, right? They're paying Dakota Joshua 3.25. They're paying Filipino just shy of $4.5 million. Drew O'Connor makes 2.5. Nils Hoglander makes $3 million. At a certain point, that's an inefficient way of building your roster. How are you going to have enough cap space to go big game hunting and get the sort of true top of the lineup difference makers you need? So 4 years times $5 million for Pius Suter, as much as I love him as a player, I would walk away from that. And if you give me 1 year times 1.6, I would do that for Forbort. I don't love the idea of the second year just because of his durability and the in the age.
That's fair. This one from Karn. I think you and I are going to agree on the answer, Harm. He said, if they keep Suter, how does that change the stance on adding a center? They probably still need one, right? And yes, the answer is yes. You still need one, even though you have Filipino. You're still going to need one, even though you have Pius Suter. I think part of the draw for Pius Suter, and again, we're repeating stuff we've said in the past, but part of the appeal of Pius Suter is that he can also be a winger and also slot in at center if you need him to be. But when you're planning your lineup, like Pius Suter could be a second line winger. Not the best option, but he can still be that for you. You've seen him do it. Obviously, we talk about how good he was on that line with Miller and Besser in the playoffs last season. So it's an interesting one with Pius Suter. I'm going to say if I can only sign one of those contracts, I'm probably signing, I guess, 2, because I would like to sign Derek Forbort as well. But I think I would do Pius Suter at 4 years, $5 million. I know the cap hits may be a bit high, but I think if that's what it's going to take, because that's what he's going to get from elsewhere, I would think about it for sure, especially when you look at the other options that are out there. I would think about it for sure, especially because he can kind of, he has that versatility. I think that's valuable as well. So I like Pius Suter. I like him a lot. I think he'd be a nice signing for them. But also, you got to try to find the next Pius Suter, as they did just a couple years ago when they signed him in August. So it's an interesting conversation to have.
He was on a shooting percentage bender. And look, part of it is I think he can consistently be a high teens goal scorer, but scoring 25 goals, I don't think he's doing it again.
No,
to be honest with you. 46 points, that's a high water mark for Suter. He shot 18.1%, whereas his career average is 13.1%. So it's not like a huge, monstrous.
He ain't touching 25 again.
Yeah.
This is a career year. It's a career year. Let's
a career year. And I'm wary of making big bets on sort of depth players coming off of career years.
I'll also add, though, that versatility also comes with the fact that he can kill penalties. Like, at worst, Pius Suter is going to be a really solid bottom 6 center. At worst.
Yes, but this is where it's not so much a Suter conversation as, again, how much money are you going to commit to forwards who aren't surefire top 6 guys?
Fair enough.
That's, especially like looking at the playoffs, that's something that I've been more mindful of. Like looking at the way Rantanen just like took over at the end of that series, or like look at how many flaws the Oilers had with their on paper, their depth, their goaltending, their blue line, no Matthias Ekholm. And yet when you have the star power at the top of your lineup, it almost doesn't matter. Whereas you look at some teams that are built with that are built sort of deeper on paper, top to bottom, they can be more quote unquote complete. But if they don't have those game breakers come playoff time, they just can't do the damage. Sometimes you need a guy who can just, and multiple guys on your roster who can put the team on their back and single-handedly win you playoff games. And my concern, looking at the Canucks roster construction right now, is Hedl, Joshua, like you've just got O'Connor, even Garland to a lesser extent. I like his contract, but that's still, a lot of money to a guy who's a middle 6 forward. You've already got a lot of money invested for sort of like middle of the lineup forwards, and Suter at $5 million, even with the cap going up, it's a little bit too rich for my blood. Again, I would do it at closer to 4, but at 5, I would walk away from that.
An interesting question is, what are these guys actually going to get on the open market? And I think Suter gets 5. Like I think Suter gets 5 by 5 on the open market, maybe 4 by 5. But I think someone gets to $5 million with Pius Suter on the open market.
I don't think he quite gets 5 by 5. Does he get 4 years times $5 million? I don't know. Maybe it's closer to 4.5. I'm curious how much the market perception has changed with
Well,
the
apparently
year
no
that
one
he's
wanted
had.
to trade for him at the deadline.
But there's a reason that 2 years ago he had to wait till August to find his contract. Now, part of that isn't, oh, nobody wanted to sign him. Part of that is his camp overestimated his contract value on July 1st. So when teams were presumably calling, they were like, we like you, but not at that price. So we're going to sign somebody else. And then when he was left without options, he had to take even less. But with that in mind, Suter does fit the profile of a player who sometimes GMs don't value as much because he's not the fastest guy. He's a little bit undersized. He's not great on faceoffs. And so even though he checks so many other boxes with his game, he isn't like a flashy player that GMs sort of overpay for.
Fair enough. All right, Jacob, how are we doing on Family Feud surveys?
We need quite a few more, so thank you for bringing it up. It's in the description on YouTube, on Facebook, in the audio podcast. If you listen on one of the other platforms, just seek us out on YouTube or on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get podcasts from. You'll be able to find the link. Please go. Also, one thing I want to say is those of you who regularly fill out the survey know there's a section at the bottom where I can say, hey, do you have any questions you want us to ask in a future survey? You guys do a great job with that, and almost every question that we use either comes from or is heavily inspired by you, the listeners. Someone also use it, or sometimes people also use it as a way to just kind of leave a comment or say something to us. And we had a really nice comment that I actually want to read out. This was anonymous. We don't know who it's from, but they said, in my opinion, please stick with the Family Feud. And this is when we were talking about some other game shows we might do as well. I think the segment will lose its charm if it loses the listeners writing in. That, and it's the game show that best translates to the audio format, whatever it is. I hope it would allow the listeners to participate as well as stream watchers. I can't always watch the stream live. Whoever submitted that, thank you very much for that feedback. And don't worry, Family Feud's not going anywhere. We know that it's the best way for those who can't watch the show live to participate and feel like they're being involved. So if you are an audio-only listener, don't you worry, Family Feud's not going anywhere.
Love that.
Family Feud's one of the best ideas I've ever come up with. Just going to throw that out there. When I came in September and said, hey, we're going to do this year, nailed it. I did steal it from a baseball podcast I listened to. But
Quads, that's a victory lap that you can absolutely take.
Deserved.
Yeah, well deserved.
Thank you. It feels weird when you guys agree with them. I all of a sudden feel like I need to make a joke about myself. But anyways, this one from 7 and 7. We'll close out on anyone else with this one. He said, I saw this on Twitter yesterday, and I was waiting to comment on it, so I'll say it on the show. He said, what is your takeaway of Sweden's GM saying, or no, I think it was Sam Hallam, Sweden's coach, saying Pettersson has a couple of injuries and is focused on next season, that being Elias Pettersson, the forward. I saw people on Twitter being like, oh, see? I told you he was hurt all season long. Folks, I know the season ended last month, but Pettersson was hurt to close out the season. Like, he didn't finish the season because he had an injury. We know he was hurt. He missed time. Don't forget that he missed all that time since that game. I think it was March 22nd against the Rangers. Like, of course he's going to nurse that back to health and get healthy and work out in the gym. You think he wants to add more hockey to his plate right now? Like, come on, what are we talking about here? Don't use that as the Canucks were lying the whole time. He was hurt to close out the year. I don't want to talk about this anymore. I was just waiting, and I didn't want to tweet that. I thought it was stupid to even get involved, but if someone brings it up in our chat, I'm going to mention it. Thank you for the contribution to the show, though. 7 and 7. We appreciate it. All right, fill out the survey. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like the video as well. And obviously, all you on podcast, you're just perfect, so don't worry. Actually, no, here. If you're on podcast, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We haven't had a review for like a year, so leave us a review. Apple Podcasts, 5-star review, please. If it's lower than 5, I don't really want to see it. So just a 5-star review. Leave us a nice little review there. It helps us big time. So if you're a regular on the show, feel free to do that. Let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day, which is brought to you by, you guessed it, Bet365. Harm, 2 games on tonight. Carolina, Washington, Edmonton, Vegas. We didn't even talk about game 1. I nailed it. I said the Leafs were going to get their 1 win of the series last night. They did it. It got a little closer than we in Leafs Nation thought it was going to be. But our Leafs pulled it out. And now I think they're going to lose 4 straight and lose the series. but they got it.
Every time when you say our Leafs, we pulled it out. Jesus. Especially when you say that in the lead up to, I think they're gonna lose the next 4 straight.
I was the only one that picked Panthers in 5 on this show, but I called it. So far I'm correct because I literally said they're gonna lose in 5 games. That's gonna be the one win that the Leafs get. Quickly before we actually pick a game for tonight, what did you think of the Sam Bennett hit on Anthony Stolarz?
Okay, so if it was anybody else, I would say not suspension worthy because it didn't look like a lot, and it is plausible as far as incidental contact, but it's Sam Bennett. Sam Bennett is the best player in the league at accidentally injuring players in the playoffs.
Yes, he's Chris Kreider again.
And so you look at the overhead angle too. The regular replay angle, I looked at it and went, he barely touched him. And there was a Sam Reinhart shot that got Stolarz in the head too. Like, how much did Bennett's contact there really make a difference? But watching the overhead angle and just knowing his history as a player, I would have slapped him with a 1-game suspension. Even just
Absolutely.
to like draw a line in the sand and say, dude, you keep injuring guys in the playoffs. You've gotten away with a lot. Cut it.
Seriously. No penalty, no nothing. I thought it should have been suspension as well. So no supplemental discipline.
Well, and also I think with everything that we've heard afterwards, and we saw that Stolarz threw up on the bench, the fact that he played 10 minutes after that. Yeah, he played 10 minutes after that and no concussion spotter pulled him. I know Hockey Night in Canada had Jake Allen on the panel, and he said he had been pulled by a concussion spotter once, and the horn sounded in the arena to stop the game, to pull him from the game because of a concussion spotter 10 seconds after there was contact with him. And the concussion spotter didn't pull Stolarz, or at least didn't pull him right away. You don't want to see any player throwing up on a bench and having to be stretchered into an ambulance because of a head injury. So, it's a bad look on the league. A, if there's no discipline for Bennett, and B, if you have a player leaving the game in that circumstance. It was not pretty to watch.
We watch a lot of hockey games. Yeah, go on.
Berube didn't even rule out Stolarz for game 2, which I think is wild considering the circumstances, but at least is good news in the sense that he is obviously trending in the right direction, and that the head injury may not be as serious as initially suspected.
I was going to make a joke about the concussion spotter eating nachos and spilled some sour cream on his shirt and just missed the hit. Couldn't get a good look at it, so he didn't do the pull. I'd actually like to get a concussion spotter on the show. Have you ever met a concussion spotter? We go to a lot of games.
No, I haven't met one before.
Are we sure they're real?
I'm adding that to our list of summer show topics. We're going to try and find a concussion spotter. I think that would be a very interesting interview. We'll have to reach out to someone, because it's all third party, not affiliated with the league, right? So
someone's sure gonna lie to us and just be like, "Oh yeah, I'm a concussion spotter." They're gonna message Jacob, "I'm a concussion spotter. Come on the show. We'll do this whole interview with them." They're just not gonna be a concussion spotter. I don't know. I don't know how to find a concussion spotter. Hopefully, we can find one. Jacob, book a concussion spotter.
I've added it to the list. We've got a few, and what'll be easier to get is I definitely want to get a player agent on to talk not about specific players, but just in general, CBA, taxes, how contracts are done. I think that could be a really interesting summer show as well. So, hey, we've talked about how our shows are going to be, or our schedule is going to cut back a little bit in the summer, but make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because we might randomly drop some interview with a concussion spotter or a player agent in July that you won't want to miss.
All right. We'll close it out there. Oh, no, Bet365. Oilers, Vegas, Caps, Hurricanes. Oh, man. Caps are underdogs at home. Caps are taking a series lead tonight. Plus 115. You can get the Washington Capitals on the money line. I'm taking that over at Bet365. And if you want to get on the action for the Stanley Cup playoffs, they've got you covered at Bet365. From game props, player props, totals, and the money line, you can even bet on futures like series winners, conference champions, the Stanley Cup champions, and much, much more. Whatever your bet is, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get in on the game. An official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Must be 90 plus to play. Please play responsibly. All right, we will wrap it up there for my co-host, Harmon Dial, and our technical producer, Jacob Lazar. Thanks again to Dave Hall for joining the show. We'll see you tomorrow, folks. My name is Dave Quadrelli. Thanks so much for the episode of Canucks Conversation.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.